And it's amazing how relevant it is. The mission statement for VEIC is to lower the economic, social, and environmental costs of energy. And you know, what a nice constellation. It fits so well today. We went through a period where what people were really interested in is how do we get the price of energy down and how do we save it because of the climate imperative, right? I always like to ask people, how many people like to have lower energy bills? Yeah? How many people believe we must solve the climate imperative? Yeah? How many of you are for local job creation? Yeah? How about investing in your local economy? How many people like to reduce the dependence on foreign oil? How many people like to increase our national security? That's energy efficiency and renewable energy. In 2031, we can actually be achieving more than a quarter of all of our power supply needs through efficiency. Meaning we can end up at 75%. We've been load growth negative since 2007, meaning we're using less energy as a state year over year than every year since 2007. Our energy use is going down in the state. And nobody in this country has ever achieved that, ever. Wonderful story that's about economics. You know, we've created through this industry since the beginning of Efficiency Vermont just under 2,000 jobs. And this is not what we say as the operators of Efficiency Vermont. This is a third-party independent analysis of all the investments. There are over 1,900 people working in Vermont today because of the efficiency industry. That's a lot of jobs in Vermont. You know, that would probably be like, what, the 10th biggest employer in the state? Something like that, if you actually aggregated them all together. That's amazing, and we barely begun. The doomsayers in 2000, when Efficiency Vermont was being formed, said this would be the death of business in Vermont because it was a new fee, because it paid for with a fee on your electric bills. Here's what happened. In 2000, Vermont had the highest electric rates in New England, bar none. And it turns out that 95% of all materials that go into efficiency work are already made in America. We don't need to cast laws to force products to be made. That part of manufacturing has stayed in this country. And 80 cents of every dollar you invest in efficiency stays in your local economy. 80 cents of every fossil fuel dollar you spend goes out of your local economy. And 80 cents of every dollar you invest in efficiency stays in your local economy. 80 cents of every fossil fuel dollar you spend goes out of your local economy. But here's what's not happening right now at all. You've got the transportation silo over here, and they're starting to move towards electric cars. You got the electric silo over here, and they're largely just trying to build generation to keep up with growth, except in places like Vermont that have been doing efficiency for a while. Nobody's really getting ready for all this new electric use to fall onto the grid. And so you're going to be short power, and your distribution systems aren't going to work. So we're going to all of a sudden hear in a lot of states that we've got to spend hundreds of millions of dollars on distribution and new plants because of this move in transportation towards electrification of vehicles. And again, the beauty of efficiency is it doesn't have to be that way. We're load growth negative. We actually have room on the wires in Vermont already. And as we then build our, whichever source works in Vermont, whether it's bio or hydro or solar or wind, as we build that capacity, we can reuse the wires we've already paid for and build the renewable generation to power our transportation future without investing in any new infrastructure on the distribution side necessarily, except for smart grid, which you've got to have to make the transportation transition work, because to make it really work, the vehicles should really become appliances that you plug into a wall, except they're appliances that should be able to flow power both ways. When we have 100,000 electric vehicles in the state of Vermont, you aggregate those all up, and I know the TRC's done some work on this, I don't know the numbers. It's amazing how much power supply that means you've actually got embedded in batteries in cars distributed throughout the state that can feed back into the grid during peak period when you're paying 14 cents a kilowatt hour.
In Europe, they decided to actually sort of, as the increment of prices went down, where they incrementally increased taxes on energy. So they kept energy artificially expensive. And what that did is it created a bonanza of energy efficiency investments through the 80s and the 90s. They're so far ahead of us right now. And so when I talked to builders in Sweden, and Denmark, and places like that, they were saying to me, we just don't understand the attitude that North Americans take towards efficiency measures, because here, I mean, the thing is, and the economics are different there because they've been doing efficiency-based building for so long, it's hard to actually find cheap materials. It's hard to find inefficient materials. You only save about 3 or 4% on your material capital costs by buying the cheap stuff, and you know so it'd be ridiculous to actually buy that because your payback is going to be so short. So everybody, you know, and the other thing they're really into is larger scale developments. And you might think, oh, large scale development, that sounds like Co-op City in Brooklyn or something like that. But what they do is they'll have design competitions. They'll take like the 10 top designs and they'll mix them all up. They'll have a big, you know, 10,000, 20,000 unit, development on a brownfield or something like that. They'll have 10 or 15 different designs all mixed up, so it's really aesthetically awesome and, you know, wonderful place to live. And because it's big scale, the more you scale these up, the more affordable all the high-end building materials become. You get nothing but triple glazed windows, nothing but the highest end insulation, and low flush toilets and all that kind of stuff. And the economics are just a no-brainer for them. For us, it's completely different. We've set up this system where you know we put so many barriers in the way of efficiency. I think that's changing. But you know what made that possible in Europe and not here is just 30 years of you know price of policies that kept energy expensive, and these developers are like, it's just, I would be crazy if I didn't build efficient. Do you know how much it costs you to do a load of laundry to dryer, or you know to run the dishwasher? I mean, you know.
I generated my own power for 2 summers, so I definitely.
Oh, okay. So you know. You feel it.
Yeah. Motivated you to find out, didn't it?
Yeah, I mean, well, that's the thing, is if everyone had to ride an exercycle to like, okay, and to do this load of laundry, I'm going to have to generate kilowatts on my exercycle, you would really understand. You know, what
it was pretty much of a litter ground, every highway, and what changed all that was one advertising campaign.
Woodsy Owl.
No, I'm thinking more of the American Indian Chief.
Oh, the American Indian Chief, that's right.
Have you seen that?
Yeah.
This is really, it changed our society.
That's true. Woodsy was
Changed our society. Because people didn't throw those bottles in the trash, they threw them out the window as they were driving down the road. And one advertising campaign changed our society. People over 50 that grew up, you know, waking up, seeing their breath.
Yeah.
And it was what was expected. Now, should we go back to that? I'm not suggesting that that's a bad idea. Believe me. But it also tells you we can adapt that quickly as a society. And I'm talking about like the late 60s, early 70s here, right? Not that long ago in the grand scheme of things. We shifted from that all the way to what you just described. And so we can modulate back a little bit. We can move the pendulum to a more rational point in terms of conservation and behavior, and find a more happy medium that actually works for our planet as well as for us.
Although one of the questions is, could Phoenix still have 4 million people with its 110 degree, you know, 60 days of 100 plus degrees, if air conditioning is out of the affordability range for half the people?
Right. You know, and even
they don't
Phoenix,
have any water.
most people are stunned here, and because it's so counterintuitive. Vermont is now, from an electric perspective, we are a summer peaking state. So we use more electricity in the summer than we do in the winter. And it's because of the massive air conditioning load that's built up in Vermont in the last 10 years. I mean, think about that. Air conditioning is a predominant driver of our energy future in Vermont.
And will be more as time
Think about it. I think the tide is turning. I think the world is, despite some of the political argument about climate change, people do understand. People of all political persuasions understand what we've done to ourselves and what we need to do to get out of it. But we're not there yet. There's still, I think there's deep understanding now, and I think that we haven't quite got to an ability to act. And I don't think we're far from it. I really don't. I think you see actions like efficiency and renewables and some of the things that are underway now and are gaining enormous momentum throughout society. And we're reaching a tipping point here coming, and then all these issues around water quality and climate and are going to come back around. People are starting to understand that water is the future gold standard. We don't have a 22nd century if we don't deal with climate. There is a growing understanding. So in the meantime, celebrate your victories where you get them in this work that you're doing.